Our process really, with the elegance in it, is that it compresses all of these separate steps that take place over time. The retting is eliminated, so you eliminate a week's worth of waiting when you're trying to field ret. So that's gone. The decortication step is incredibly intense and effortless, and then you have the softening, whitening, and degumming and decontamination processes all happening as well. So you take these 5 different steps that usually take place across about 16 days or so, which is the current Chinese timeline to create a textile grade fiber, and you compress them down to 90 minutes.
That's Adin Alai, CEO of 9Fiber. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I talked to Adin Alai about 9Fiber, a Maryland-based company that takes the waste material from the CBD industry, the stalks and stems and whatnot, and turns them into the raw materials for a bunch of different manufacturing applications. We'll hear about the process that they use and how they work with farmers, and how the coronavirus shutdown forced them to pivot in a creative way. And then, after that interview, we'll hear from cover crop coach and hemp innovator Steve Groff, who wanted to further discuss the idea of regenerative agriculture after last week's interview with the crop consultant from the Rodale Institute, who gave us a definition of regenerative ag. But first, a quick message from our sponsor, King's Agri-Seeds. Healthy hemp needs healthy soil. You can build life into your soil with King's Agri-Seeds diverse and balanced cover crop cocktails that feature various rooting structures to fix nitrogen, alleviate compaction, increase biodiversity, suppress weeds, and more. Set your 2021 crop up for success by planting cover crops this fall. Call King's Agri-Seeds at 717-687-6224 or go to kingsagriseeds.com. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the show. So today is one of our Fiberside chats, and this is neat because it's an intersection of the CBD industry and the fiber industry. You'll know what I mean in a few minutes. We're going to let Adin Alai from 9Fiber tell us all about it. Adin Alai, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Thank you, Eric. My name is Adin Alai. I'm the CEO of 9Fiber. We're an early stage agri-tech company that has a patented solution to transform the waste streams from the industrial hemp and cannabis industries into sustainable materials, fiber, and cellulose for applications and products in 9 major markets.
When people talk about, hemp fiber, there's sort of a dirty little secret in the hemp fiber space that the normal process for making fibers from hemp it's very toxic. Most hemp fiber comes from, or most hemp fabric comes from China, where they use this chemical retting process that's not eco-friendly in any way. But it looks like 9Fiber has this patented process that could eliminate that toxic step in making the fiber. Can you talk about the process?
Sure. I think China has a variety of ways that they produce their hemp fiber, everything from steam blasting to just a regular field retting to a wet retting to a chemical process. It kind of really depends. As you know, they're the dominant player in the hemp fiber and fabric industry, and that's where the majority of textiles are made in general. So they're really advanced with what they do over there. That said, from an innovation standpoint, since there hasn't been the need to really innovate, they're still stuck in a lot of processes that would not fly over here in the U.S. or are just labor intensive to the point where it wouldn't scale here in the U.S. So our chemistry is an eco-friendly chemistry. It only gives off water and oxygen as byproducts, and it was really designed to solve a waste problem. This back in the, let's call it the gray market days, our process inventor, who happens to be my brother, was a cannabis grower in Colorado and in California, and was generating an exorbitant amount of stalk and stem waste on a weekly basis due to the nature of the cannabis business at some sort of scale. And as a result, he just was tired of doing what everybody else is doing, which is, burning it or running it out into the middle of a forest someplace and just dumping it or whatever the case may be. And really wanted to dedicate some time and energy into creating a solution that actually makes sense. And at that time, he fell in love with the story of hemp, the promise of hemp, right? The conspiracy of hemp and the frustration of hemp. It's a 4-letter word for a reason, right? And realized that that if he could pull this off, that there's a niche in doing something really, really unique. His focus at the time was creating a textile grade fiber or decorticating marijuana stalks, which nobody had ever done before, and nobody thought he could derive any kind of fiber from marijuana or cannabis, whatever you want to call it. And he literally locked himself in a garage, and 6 months later figured it out. At that point, he brought on a chemical engineer, which helped him stabilize his invention, and they filed it. They filed the patent pending, and then they brought me on to kind of scale and run the business, essentially to answer the question, who cares, right? So our process really, with the elegance in it, is that it compresses all of these separate steps that take place over time. The retting is eliminated. So you eliminate a week's worth of waiting when you're trying to field ret. So that's gone. The decortication step is incredibly intense and effortless. And then you have the softening, whitening, and degumming and decontamination processes all happening as well. So you take these 5 different steps that usually take place across about 16 days or so, which was the current Chinese timeline to create a textile grade fiber. And you compress them down to 90 minutes, and which is what the chemistry does. And it's also able to be used on any of the feedstock that we're predominantly growing here in the US. We're not growing hemp for fiber here. We're growing CBD and we're growing cannabis. So our chemistry essentially solves this burgeoning waste problem for both of those industries as a first step before farmers start growing for fiber here in the US.
That's really interesting. Is this technology something that, it's patented, so obviously you're protecting your intellectual property, but how can, other places around the country get involved in this where they could also use your technology? It seems like that would really help jumpstart a fiber industry if more people had access to it.
Well, our vision right now is to stand up regional processing centers in places where the volume of material in a tight radius, about 150 mile radius, is there to sustain these processing centers. So to create a kind of a hub and spoke system where we would create our circular economy by working with farmers, giving them the latitude to grow whatever they need to grow that makes money for them. And then there's a secondary relationship on that stalk and stem waste, so they don't have to worry about that waste. And on the cannabis side, it's the same way. So our hope is to divert that waste from going to landfill or just being burned in the field, and really turning it into something that's meaningful, and to create that kind of regional economy with those partners and relationships in order to kind of make that happen.
Okay. What sorts of volume are you able to handle at this point?
So at this point, COVID has completely sidewaysed our business trajectory, as I'm sure it has for many people. So we've done some pivoting, but we are at the stage now where we're doing an aggressive raise to build the machine that deploys our chemistry at scale. Okay. So the first scale would eat about 4 million pounds of stalk and stem waste on an annual basis, and the second scale, which would be a full commercial deployment, is 35 million pounds of stalk and stem waste on an annual basis. And as we look at the map now, there's about 12 to 15 places in the country that can support a commercial scale processing facility at that 35 million. At that 35 million threshold. So we see nothing but growth in that sector.
Okay. So how long until you have that first one ready? Like, where are you in that process?
So we were actually supposed to wrap everything up before COVID hit, and then that happened, and so we're starting back from we've been starting back from zero, but it looks like we'll be underway here before Labor Day, and then
okay,
yeah, we'll be underway before then, and then hopefully we'll be ready for the next harvest.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the circular economy. How do you work with farmers? Is it like a contract situation, or just how do they get paid?
So there's two ways, right? And we get calls during the growing season, and there's really two ways to this. There's some folks who just say, just for the love of God, just please come pick this stuff up. And so there's a donation piece where they're just kind of giving it to us, and we're just going to take it off their hands, and that eliminates a cost for them. So in a sense, they're getting paid because there's a cost they don't have to deal with. Then there's the other piece where if they will pre-prepare it for us, so if they separate stalk from stem, clip it or whatever the case may be, then there's an acquisition price for that, and then we would work that into the relationship.
Okay. And
I mean, you're not buying a Lamborghini with this, because this, the idea here is that if the farmer's growing for CBD or growing for some other product, that waste is going to go somewhere, and rather than it going where it shouldn't, let's have it. Let's put it somewhere where it should be. So the pricing is really kind of dependent on what the farmer's effort is going to, what they're going to put out as far as the product is concerned.
Like, no one's going to grow hemp just to supply you with the material.
No, but the idea, I mean, our vision is, and maybe I'm being a bit idealistic, but all recycling businesses start off this way, right? They all start off solving a waste problem, and then the market is established, and then you start to see that waste no longer being waste. It's now a commodity. And so our hope is that with the community that we create, that as we stabilize the industry, we can then contract farmers to pivot into what needs to be grown. And then there's more of a contractual relationship that makes sense. Right now, we're solving a problem, and in North America last year, Canada and the U.S., you had a million metric tons of waste that was created. So, and both industries are growing at about 37% annually. So this is not going anywhere.
Can you talk about the output? Like, what is your technology? Like, what form is the material once you're done with it?
So that's a great question. Let me start from the beginning. So let's take a 1 pound segment of stalk, which is on average about 4 feet long, right? So you give me a 4 foot long segment, right? A whole stalk segment. And the chemistry essentially peels that fiber off of the herd. So you're left with a whole herd segment of 1 pound, a whole herd segment, and you're left with the resulting fiber. So the yield on 16 ounces, which is a pound, it's about 14 and a half ounces a herd to about an ounce of cottonized fiber, so fibers at its kind of finished state. And we lose about a half an ounce in gum, lignin, impurities, metals, just garbage that was, it's kind of in the plant. Chlorophyll, all that stuff is usually gone.
So you have a waste stream there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But we've had the wastewater. So our design is a closed loop system. So we would be filtering out some of that stuff. But we've tested our wastewater already with Denver wastewater, and it's safe enough to go down a commercial drain. So there's nothing like super toxic on it. But recognizing that different municipalities will have different limits.
Right.
Yeah. So essentially, it's like a Dr. Seuss in and out machine, right? You get one thing in, and two things come out, and that's essentially what you have.
Okay. Are you then making products with the herd and the fibers, or are you selling those to manufacturers?
So really, what we're doing, going back to how we started, is answering the question, who cares, right? So we have this eco-friendly process. It transforms this waste into a fiber and a cellulose. But does anybody really want it? And that was the question that I set out to answer. And it turns out a lot of people want it, and a lot of people want to test it, and a lot of people want to work with it. So in some cases, we will co-develop the finished product with somebody in that relationship. But in most cases, we're supplying that sustainable material input that's replacing something similar in the finished product that beats on price, performance, and obviously the sustainability story with the local supply.
Right. Okay. Can you talk about some of those partnerships and products that are being made?
So there's a few I can talk about. One is our masks that are on our website now. We pivoted to when COVID hit. We obviously wanted to figure out a way to kind of, make our business still relevant, since R&D and all that stuff was shut down for the time being as companies try to stabilize. So we took our waste fiber that we've been just collecting at very, very small levels, mainly from Colorado and in Maryland, and decorticating that and putting that through our chemistry. The chemistry does the decorticating, but doing our process, and then taking that material and weaving it with existing hemp cloth to create the fabric that you see on our masks. So that was a really unique finished product that we created. I brought on a designer in Los Angeles, and we've kind of leveraged his resources and know-how to bring something out to the market that we think resonates with folks. Yeah. With respect to other things, our focus is really to be in a very technical place with respect to how this material is used. While a lot of folks are interested in, maybe just doing a bag, and there's nothing wrong with that, we want to be in aerospace and in friction and automotive and composites and semiconductor type industries where the cleanliness of our material and what we do with it makes it applicable for those things. So we partnered up with one of the largest brake pad manufacturers in the world. And it turns out our COO is best friends with their chief scientist. That's and this company, This company manufactures brakes for the majority of Japanese cars out there. Mustang, the F-150, which is the standard that all brakes have to kind of conform to, is on a Ford F-150, believe it or not. And then most brake pads, you've got arguably somewhere between 3 and 6% tree cellulose. That's a functional filler in most brake formulations. And so we just replace our stuff with theirs, with the existing stuff. And turns out it performs better, it burns better, it doses better. And at least as of last summer, there was an F-150 running around Detroit with our brake pads on. So just gathering empirical data while they're waiting for us to scale up. Right. So that's kind of an example of where because of the cleanliness of our material, the application, the cellulose applications, it becomes a much different ballgame. In nanocellulose world with functional fillers or inert fillers and cosmetics and pharmaceuticals and food and that type of thing is kind of where we see our niche.
Okay, well, that's really fascinating. So how long before, all of us are driving around with hemp brake pads?
Well, as I'm sure, right? As I'm sure everybody who's listening knows, right? Brakes are the most heavily tested piece in any automotive, in any car. So there's an extensive process, but in that process, it's like a 3-year, I think, testing process. But in that process, there's lots of volume and lots of testing, and the short answer is it would take at least 3 years before it's approved to be in a brake pad.
Okay. Almost 2 years ago, the early days of this podcast, I interviewed a research scientist at Ford by the name of Debbie Malusky. And yeah, she was talking about they of course, this is before the Farm Bill passed, so there wasn't really any sort of supply in the U.S., but she's sort of chomping at the bit to get high volumes of hemp so they can start doing all sorts of different things for the automobile industry. So yeah, that's great.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, we know there's interest there. Mm-hmm. We know there's interest there. It just all comes down to, does it make sense from a cost perspective? Does it really have a better performance? And what do you need to do to it in order to get it to a place where it works for their applications, right?
Are you finding most of your material is coming from the marijuana side or the hemp side, or is it an even split?
Oh my God, no, the hemp side outweighs it. But the marijuana side is very interesting because it's a different product. I mean, our chemistry makes the waste all agnostic, so you really don't know at the end of the day. But from a cellulose perspective, it all looks the same. But it's significant. The difference is on the cannabis side, especially with the indoor growing, you've got a waste yield almost weekly. On the hemp side, you've got a waste yield that's pretty much annual, sometimes biannual.
Right.
And on the cannabis side, in outdoor grow, you have an annual yield, but by and large, you're looking at indoor grows and the amount of waste they generate. So it's still, the hemp just pales what it's the hemp just so much outnumbers what cannabis is doing.
Okay. Do you think the marijuana stigma matters at all anymore? Are you bumping up against that in any of the relationships you're trying to form?
What in talking to the sustainability divisions of some of these large partnerships that we have, both in textiles and in different in industries like the automotive and plastics and so on, it really tends to be sector specific. With textiles, where I'm liaising with several sustainability departments within these kind of large global brands, actually having hemp in your product doesn't really move the needle financially for a large company. So there's not enough of us out there that really care or make that their primary decision in their purchasing, right? Like if you're looking at a pair of jeans, what does everybody really care about? They just care that their butt looks good in a pair of jeans. That's all they care about. Right? Most people don't know that there's 5 or more highly technical forms of fiber and performance characteristics that go to make your butt look good in jeans. They don't really care. If it's the first thing you do when you put on a pair of jeans, you turn around, you look at your butt. That's the first thing anybody does. And so with that being said, most folks don't know how technical the fibers and the fabric really have become. So sustainability seems to be kind of the leading edge on it. And what we're finding is that folks love our branding because A, of our recycling story, but B, we're not called hemp. We're not called marijuana. We're called 9Fiber in the same way that Gore-Tex is simply polypropylene, which is oil, right? But folks that are that embrace kind of a conservatism or not conservatism, what's the word I'm looking for? People that are, very much about nature. Some of them don't even know that they're wearing an oil as a garment. Right. So
conservationists, is that the word?
That's the word. People that are conservationists will wear synthetics that are derived from oil and not even know it because it's not branded as such. So folks are really digging our at least our branding at this point.
Do you think hemp in general could use like a rebranding effort?
Absolutely.
What do you think that would look like?
I don't know, but there's I think the younger generation, the millennial generation, the Gen X generation don't have the same stigma with it as the older generation. And so I think until it starts to get embraced in mass, it's not going to change its stigma. And its stigma, I mean literally, I just got this joke last week, right? Somebody said, well, if you put the brake pads on, can I stand close to the wheel and smell the smoke from the brake pad? It's like
it's hard to even laugh at those jokes anymore.
It is. It's hard to laugh at it, but that's still out there. So I think a rebranding is certainly going to take some time. But yes, what would it look like? I don't know, because I think calling it anything but what it is not honest.
Right.
But I think focusing on what it does and what it does for the environment is probably the best way through.
Right. You mentioned before a little bit about how the COVID-19 crisis was affecting things for you. Can you go a little further in that? Like, how else has it affected your business or your relationships with other businesses?
Oh my goodness. Well, we were working an incubator in Colorado, and that shut down, and the team kind of had to scatter to the four corners, and so that slowed us down from just a communication standpoint. And then we had some pending, very large relationships that we were ready to ink. With other companies, and that got completely put on hold, and it's been really difficult getting engagement again, because factories aren't open, or
Mm.
places are really slow to respond, and everybody's working from home. So when we realized that some of our revenue projections weren't going to happen this year, we pivoted into this mask space. And now, originally we had always thought of textiles as being a year three play, but it looks like, and we would be predominantly a B2B business, but it looks like B2C might be the fastest path forward, and then
Okay.
back into the B2B. So it's completely turned us upside down.
Right. And where are you making the masks, and how can people get them?
So the masks are being made in LA, or in California. So it's made in the US, and they're on my website. And we also do co-branding and wholesale pricing for large companies. We've done some co-branding for a large financial firm out of Chicago, and put their logo on the outside of the mask. And
Okay.
we've got two different types of masks. We've got a 100% hemp, which is a 2-layer hemp mask that has our waste fiber kind of weaved in it. And then our second product is 100% silver cloth on the outside, and our hemp fabric on the inside. And that silver cloth is actually rated for antiviral protection. We actually had it rated for flu.
Oh,
So it has an antiviral protection, and because it's 100% silver cloth and not an infused silver, there's no degradation in its performance over washes and wears. So it's a really unique product, and
okay.
very luxe looking, by the way.
Cool. All right. And so that's at 9fiber.com, the number 9, the word fiber.com.
That's it. That's it.
Okay. So
And
how do you,
it's called 9Fiber because there's 9 markets for this material that we feel can for products to go into. So that's why
can
it's
you
called
name them
9Fiber.
all?
Oh my God, it changes all the time. But yeah, so you've got textiles, you have non-wovens, you have paper, you have construction, you have plastics, you have semiconductor, you have composites, you have fuel would be kind of more of a pie in the sky type of situation, and you've got absorbents.
I think that's 11 or 12. You might have to change the name of your business now.
I think that's 9, but I could be wrong. But it's anything that cellulose plays in
Yeah.
is where we would play. So there's a lot of applications.
Okay. How do you think this coronavirus shutdown will sort of affect the whole hemp space?
Well, on the CBD side, it seems like a lot of folks are up, and I think the thing that's challenging the CBD space is the number of states that are coming online, right? And states that are going out of R&D or research limitations to commercial growth. And I think that's what's driving prices down on the CBD side. What is good about that is that finally there is an investment appetite for the industrial fiber sector, and folks are realizing that CBD will soon commoditize, and the industrial fiber sector is really where the innovation in the future really is. So that's kind of what I'm hanging my hat on, and we really started to see an uptick in those conversations towards the tail end of last year and going into this year. So how does COVID affect all of that? I think it's focusing the investment dollars into looking to see what's next in the hemp industry. So finally, it can take hold where it should.
Are you involved with any of the sort of like hemp lobbying groups, or there's sort of coalitions forming around the country? Here in Pennsylvania, we've got the local supply chain coalition, and there's a steering committee, and there's all sorts of just groups of people getting together to talk about that. Are you involved in any of those, either in Maryland or Colorado?
Yeah, we're part of the Maryland Hemp Coalition, part of Colorado Hemp Industries Association, and also the larger body. On the cannabis side, we're members of the Marijuana Industry Group, which is the largest trade association in Colorado. And just tangentially, working with the Maryland Farm Bureau, working with folks that are just interested in learning more about, what to do with this material and how it can be helpful. So there's some we're aligned formally with some organizations, but also very loosely kind of educating folks as they come to us.
Okay. So you're based in Maryland. You have got operations in Colorado. Are you able to?
We will have operations in Colorado
okay.
if we can ever get going again. Yes.
So will you have the recycling capability here on the East Coast too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, Maryland isn't generating anywhere near enough waste for us to handle, but Pennsylvania certainly does, and
Yep.
and Kentucky does, and North Carolina does. So there is a lot of opportunity on the East Coast as well.
Okay, great. How soon before you're operational here on the East Coast?
Well, I mean, everything depends on what happens in the next 30 to 60 days, but ideally we would be ready by we would be looking at establishing 1, if not 2 to 3 by next harvest season. So where those 3 are, we'd really have to think about where that volume is, because you're not just putting something down for the short term for our pilot, right? We're putting something down for the commercial scale. So 35 million pounds at a minimum is what we would need in a tight radius. So
what else would you need to happen sort of in the world or in the hemp space for you guys to just take off? Maybe that's like what challenges are in your way still?
The challenges, I think, affect everybody in the industrial hemp sector. And I've touched on this a little bit, I think a little bit earlier, but it's really, where's the investment dollars coming from? And when you look at the choices an investment group or an investor has with respect to where they can place their money, right? Their goal is, by and large, is to maximize their return as quickly as possible. Well, I mean, if you can do that, put your money in Tinder 2.0 or something along those lines, right? Don't in manufacturing is not the place for that. So finding that right group or that right person who A, believes in sustainability, right? B, believes in the power of manufacturing, right? And C, believes in standing up early stage companies to support that growth. I mean, that's a little needle in the haystack. And I think the biggest challenge for our entire sector is finding that group or that person who's willing to come in at the angel stage, and specifically fascinated or passionate about domestic manufacturing. The exodus of that is really kind of soured the stomach of a lot of investors and a lot of investment groups. And what we're finding is angels look like or work like VCs, and VCs work like banks. So finding the actual true angel investor or investment group is challenging. That would be one of the biggest challenges that I think everybody in our sector has.
Right. Do you have any inkling of who that might be, or any sense of any group out there that is ready to invest?
Well, hopefully this group that we're talking to now will be the angel that we're courting and that we're looking for. But no, what we're starting to see. I mean, listen, COVID has exposed so many vulnerabilities in the way we manufacture anything here in the U.S. and how much has shifted overseas, and at the mercy that we really have become with respect to our goods. We've become a very white collar society by and large, with all the grunt work or a lot of the grunt work being done elsewhere.
Right.
And so I think if I were to say if there's one positive thing that's come out of COVID, is just getting us out of that insomnia or that sleep, getting us out of that. Out of just being complacent with what that is, and really looking at standing up manufacturing domestically. And through that, we are seeing new groups that have arisen, individuals that have arisen that are also seeing what we're seeing, and we're like-minded with bringing some manufacturing back here to the U.S., especially with this agricultural product.
Right. Yeah, the global supply chains just baffle me. I saw something this morning. Somebody was talking about, like, they had fruit, maybe it was apples or something, but they were picked in Argentina, shipped to Thailand for packaging, and then shipped back to the U.S. for sale. Just like, where is the logic there? So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, and yet there's a rationale behind it. So there's an economic case to support that, and
Right,
that's
it's cheaper to do it that way,
yeah,
which that
right.
blows my mind.
Yeah, that I don't understand that at all. But is all manufacturing going to come back to the U.S.? No, I honestly think that ship has sailed. Is some going to come back? Yes, absolutely. I certainly do, and I certainly hope that, or at least our vision is that on the hemp side, manufacturing end products that are sustainably based will be sourced and created here in the U.S.
Adin Alai, thank you so much for your time today.
Eric, thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much.
All right, so I will put a link to 9fiber.com on the show page for this episode for your browsing convenience. Okay, so over the past couple of weeks, there's been a discussion sort of brewing about regenerative agriculture. First, Steve Groff mentioned it in an interview a couple of weeks ago, and then last week I wanted to get some definition around it, so I talked to Sam from the Rodale Institute, and then I heard back from Steve, and he wants to discuss it a little further, so that's what we're doing here today. Hey Steve, so you listened to last week's show. You heard me sort of trying to get a definition around regenerative ag, and you possibly have a difference of opinion, so I want to extend to you an opportunity to Tell me it.
Yeah. So when we use the term regenerative agriculture, it's kind of like the updated version of the word sustainable agriculture, which was coined in the mid-90s. And it really didn't take long until almost every group out there kind of claimed some sort of sustainable component. That was the buzzword. Mm-hmm. So in that context, the word, the terminology of regenerative agriculture has been around for a while, but it really wasn't used recently until about 10, 12 years ago, when a guy by the name of Ray Archuleta, who is kind of known as the soil guy or the soil health guy, he gets all over the nation. And he really started using that word again, regenerative agriculture. And he put together five principles that is what it meant to him. And those 5 principles are no or maybe minimal soil disturbance, which is where the no-till part comes in, keeping the soil covered with plant residues or whatever, which is kind of related to no-till. And then keeping a living root in the soil year-round, which again goes back to no-till and cover crops in the context of cash crops. So those are kind of the three of the 5 that are really where the no-till farmers really were set up to do and have been doing well in the context of soil health. Another buzzword, I guess you could say, that kind of was around as well. But then the other 2, point number 4 and 5, is diversity. To incorporate diversity into your crop rotation, both through your cash crops and your cover crops. And this is when all those multi-species cover crop mixes came forth. And it really comes back to trying to mimic nature as much as possible. Now, you could argue almost everyone says they want to mimic nature, but this is where the terminology sort of, every group tries to use it to promote their thing or what they do, what they're good at. The 5th principle is incorporate animals or put animals into the cropping system. And sometimes people say, well, there's actually a 6th point, which is all about what is the context. Because when you go around the country, go around the world, all these things have context to them. And I don't want to get into that here a whole lot now, but I just want to mention it. So, I've come out of the no-till cover crop, soil health movement, if you will. And then here about 3 years ago, the Rodale Institute, which you mentioned here, they came out with kind of an updated, I'll call it version or definition of organic that was regenerative organic agriculture. So they put the word organic in there. And that's what was talked about last week. And that's great because that's a good update from organic, because organic agriculture is basically a list of how to grow crops. It really doesn't address the end soil health parameters that we're looking for. So it's more of how to grow them, not in the context of soil health.
Well, the Rodale Institute has always been about soil health. You know, their whole concept has been about soil health from the very beginning. And I think it was Bob Rodale who coined the term regenerative ag. So I feel like they have some ownership there.
Oh, they do. They do. I'm just saying that from the bigger picture here, and right now you have even large corporate companies out there are using the term regenerative agriculture.
Right, which is why I wanted to get a definition around it, because I don't think it should be co-opted for marketing. It seems to me like if farmers are going to save the world, and I'm convinced that they're going to, then we need to be thinking about long term. We need to be thinking about the soil. And I guess for me, it's like I know a lot of cover crop guys do the burn down, right? They kill it with glyphosate. And that to me, it goes against it. Like in my mind, and not to get all spiritual on you here, but I feel like that kind of stuff is almost like a crime against nature, crime against God. I don't know. I don't know where you are on that, but that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, well, understood. But here's another viewpoint, and that is the use of tillage. First of all, tillage is not natural. Number one.
I'm on board. I'm with you on no tillage. Yep,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And then it also it kills soil life, which earthworms is a big one. It doesn't kill them all, but it kills some of them.
The tillage, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what's glyphosate doing to the soil?
Well, there again, that's almost like a black hole if we have to talk about that, because my viewpoint, I'll back up a little bit here, is unless we as a society will go out and forage for berries and nuts in the woods, we'll just say, or just out in nature, we have to look at that way of mimicking nature. We all want to mimic nature as much as possible, but unless we go to that extreme, there's going to have to be some compromises. And the best example I give is the use of, we could say, the use of automobiles or vehicles. So vehicles pollute. Even if you have an electric car, that electricity needs to be generated somewhere. So there's a certain amount of pollution out there. There's a certain amount of risk of being injured or killed or maimed. But if we think about this objectively, we're no longer as a society want to use either walking or animals like horses to get from point A to point B. So we're willing to, in a sense, pollute a little bit, and they're getting better at that.
Well, we pollute a lot through that. I mean, that's the main source of carbon in the atmosphere is from our transportation on this planet. So we need to get past that as a species.
Right, and that's what we're trying to do, and that's why I'll bring in with glyphosate. Glyphosate has been used in agriculture and other uses over the last, 40 or 50 years. I believe that we need to get away from it, and we're trying to, and I think we will. But you just can't say, because if you ban glyphosate, then you're going to have to use a lot more tillage. And when you till up the soil, again, you're killing some of the soil life, but you're also subjecting it to erosion. And, we have big rain events like we have now. We have lost some of our soil into our rivers, lakes, and streams and whatever. So it's not a black and white issue.
No, there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah, and that's my whole point. In the whole regenerative agriculture, you say regenerative agriculture, and you ask 10 people, you're going to have 10 slightly different definitions of it. So
or more, yeah.
And right. And my point here is that we all collectively need to do better. Just like they are improving the automobiles. So you look at the 1970s gas guzzlers that were out there. That's not even legal anymore. But then what will we have in 10 years from now? It's going to be a lot better. To the degree, I don't know. the same way in the way we farm as well.
Yeah. Well, you bring up cars, like, so by the late 80s, cars were getting very, fuel efficient.
Sure.
And then gas got really cheap in the mid 90s, and then they started building these great big, V8 cars again. So yeah, exactly. So I mean,
it's just the reality of, a society, I guess you'd say, and there's so many forces at work here. My whole thing about regenerative agriculture is, you may or may not think that I fit that paradigm, and I don't. That's okay. I get that, because I'm not espousing that there is a specific way to farm that is the pinnacle of regenerative agriculture, because I feel that there are several methods, organic being one of them, using no-till and cover crops being another. Here's the thing. Over the past 20 years, if you want to, mention groups, the organic community, their biggest challenge is the tillage aspect in controlling weeds. That's probably the biggest challenge and the biggest negative part of organic agriculture. The biggest negative part of no-till and cover crops is the use of herbicides. The good thing is, the thing we can celebrate is those two groups are coming closer and closer together. We have meetings and I speak at organic meetings. I have many organic farmers who have been in my farm here to learn, to see what they can do on their farms to reduce tillage. I've, spoken at no-till conferences, where I'm telling, farmers, we got to use less herbicides. So I'm a big picture type guy. And so whenever someone is moving toward these principles that I outlined, moving toward less tillage, moving toward less use of herbicides, I'm all for it. The reality of it is, for agriculture in general, we have not figured out how to grow everything no-till organic. That is not possible at the moment. And that would be a whole other show right there. Right. But there's nuances of it. And I actually do not use herbicides in all my fields. But, today we just received 3.5 inches of rain in 3 hours, and I was out and I could not find any runoff. And I was actually filming it and so forth. So,
well, it was like I was at your farm for, field day last year, and you had the guys from the Stroud Water group, and you had the demonstration where you had, a clump of soil with cover crops and, bare soil. And it was amazing. I have some video of that.
Yeah. So it's about, let's celebrate the fact of, there's a lot of groups out there, I feel, if you're going to pigeonhole this whole thing, that are under the umbrella of regenerative agriculture. No, we don't all look alike. We don't all quite believe the same way. But generally speaking, when you compare it to what I'm going to call conventional agriculture, we're well on the way to making the planet better. And I'm excited about the future as we learn how to both use less herbicides and also use less tillage. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. That's where the debates are all centered around, pretty much.
Something in there that I pick up on what you're saying is that diversity makes us stronger.
Absolutely. And that's why I just wanted to, share a little bit about my perspective on that and my experience, in the context is, I consider myself a regenerative agriculture farmer, but that's just where I'm at. Some people may disqualify me, for whatever reason, but, hey, I'm here to try to make the planet better and the way we grow food, and that's part of why I enjoy growing hemp as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that we were able to work this out.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Appreciate you allowing us to put our opinions out there, and we want to keep learning. I'm all about keeping the learning, and so we can do a better job.
All right. Well, you're always welcome on our podcast, Steve. So appreciate the time.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
All right, that's the show. Thanks for listening. Hey, so if you have an opinion about regenerative ag or industrial hemp or the fiber industry or whatever, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me. Send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. My name is Eric Harlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Seriously, love to hear from you. You can even call and leave me a message. Call 717-721-4462. Oh, and you can check us out on Instagram at LF Podcast Hemp. All right, well, I hope you and your family are staying safe and being smart and generally doing okay in the weirdest year of my life, 2020. So, okay, thanks again for listening. Until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.
Episode 96 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. The show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The strange and enchanting music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.